Money FM 89.3, best of breakfast. Climate Connections.
Welcome to Climate Connections. What comes to mind when you find out there's a rat in your house? Well, the mere mention of the presence of a rat in living or working spaces could easily send city dwellers scurrying for cover, quite literally. And it's just about to get rattier. Scientists are warning that cities around the globe are in the middle of a rat storm that's worsening, with the boom primarily driven by one factor: climate change. Dr. Jonathan Richardson, assistant professor of biology at the University of Richmond, decided to research urban rat trends after seeing media reports of rats taking over cities.
My lab has been working on urban rodents and urban rats for about a dozen years, and we sort of got drawn into the urban rat world because there's so many unknowns that, you answer one question and it leads to another question and another question. And so it's sort of this never-ending rabbit hole, or rat hole, I guess we could say, of exploration for the scientific questions. And of course, those scientific questions have a lot of applied relevance for rats because they affect people in so many ways. For this particular study, we got interested in it because we were seeing lots of media reports about, this city has the most rats, or this city has an explosion in rats, or this city is experiencing a huge uptick in rat numbers. And none of those reports were really underpinned by data, or at least data that we would, as scientists, think is data that we should have much confidence in. And so we thought, all right, well, we're urban rat scientists. We should be able to fairly easily go out and find the data for a number of cities and try to address general trends that exist. And we thought initially we might be able to get data for a few dozen or even 100 cities. And it turns out we were really naive, because one of the things that this study highlights is that cities don't really collect systematic data on their rat populations. So it ended up being very hard to even get the 16 cities represented that are in this study. We had to do public records requests, and we had to make special requests to city agencies for some of this data. And so in hindsight, we were naive, but that highlights an important gap in data collection that cities will need to implement. The cities that are serious about addressing this, one of the big things they'll need to add to their rodent management plans is collecting reliable and systematic data on rat activity and rat abundance, so that they know how many rats they have to start with, how those numbers may be changing going forward, and then if their efforts are effective, right? We have to be able to track if there's changes in rat numbers in response to city efforts to control their populations.
Now, from the data that Dr. Richardson and his research team gathered from 16 cities, 11 showed significant increasing trends in rat numbers, including Washington, D.C., New York, and Amsterdam. Only 3 cities experienced decline, including Tokyo and New Orleans. Just like humans, when it's colder, rats are likely to spend less time outdoors searching for food. But temperature increases may be expanding the seasonal activity periods for rats, providing them a wider window to stay active longer into the winter and to begin foraging above ground for food resources earlier in the spring.
So cities that are warming faster over the last 50 years are experiencing faster increases in rat numbers. And we have biological hypotheses about why that might be. Rats are a small mammal, which is constrained physiologically by cold weather because they have trouble producing enough body heat to sustain themselves when it gets really, really cold out. And especially the Norway rat, Rattus norvegicus, which is one of the 2 species that is in this data, they are subterranean in terms of where they burrow, where their nests are, where much of their activity is, and they really only come above ground to find food and to forage. And so in the northern parts of their range, they are often limited by winter cold temperatures. And so you don't see a lot of rats over the winter, especially when it's very cold out. And so one of the most likely mechanisms explaining the pattern that we saw with climate warming and more rats is that even if it's just by a few days, a week, maybe even 2 weeks, that winter is delayed going into winter, and if spring starts a few days or a week earlier at the end of winter, then the rats are going to be able to be above ground for that much longer and feed and maintain body condition and maybe even squeeze out another reproductive bout or two. And that's true if you just have a warm snap over the winter. They could come out above ground for even a day or two to feed themselves, add body weight back to them that maybe they've lost over the winter when they haven't been able to feed as much. And then especially Norway rats, they cache food, so they can bring back and restore their food caches. Sometimes we call them pantries in their underground nests. And all of those things can lead to accelerated population growth.
Beyond weather pattern changes, human activities within cities are contributing significantly to making rats one of the most prolific mammals on Earth. For thousands of years, smart, cooperative, and resilient, rats have co-evolved with humans and fine-tuned their ability to take advantage of our trash, debris piles, sewers, and small postage stamp-sized plots of soil along sidewalks for food and nesting.
The other variables that we found associated with rat increases were the degree of urbanization in cities. So cities that were covered by more concrete and asphalt and had less vegetation had faster increasing rat numbers. We don't exactly know the reasons for that. Previous studies that have looked at the association between rats and vegetated green spaces in cities have found mixed evidence. Some studies have found that there's more rats around green space. Some studies have found that there's less rats around green space. And the reason that it's kind of a double-edged sword for that type of habitat for rats is that green spaces have a lot of bare soil. For especially a Norway rat, that's great. They can burrow, they can dig, they can remove soil and make their nests and colony networks. But green spaces also don't tend to generate a lot of food waste. So we think what might be going on is that very small green spaces, like small pocket parks within cities, may be fine for people to say, take their lunch break, go to the small park. You can eat your lunch at any part of the park and then walk back to your work and, toss your leftover food waste or garbage in the rubbish bin nearby. As you get to bigger and bigger parks, like say Central Park, or I know there's one in Singapore around a river, I can't think of the name right now, but those very large urban parks, in that situation, we think that people are exploring the perimeters of those parks and can walk for their lunch break and have lunch around the edge. And so rats may be fine around the edge, but once you move towards the interior of those very big parks, people are less likely to be walking their lunch in and leaving their food waste in the interior. So probably it's a less good habitat for rats in terms of finding food. The third and last variable we found was associated with increases in rats was population density. So cities that are more densely packed with humans also have faster increases in their rat numbers. And that makes sense from just a food resource perspective. More people equals more garbage equals more food waste available for the rats. So that one makes very intuitive sense. There were other ones we tested which weren't significant, had no relationship, and one of those was GDP, or economic output. We thought that cities that had more economic means to maybe control rats would have slower increases in rats. And that wasn't the case. Wealthy cities, poor cities, there was no association between that and rat increases.
Tracking and understanding rat population dynamics is crucial when it comes to managing them. But one big challenge of pinpointing what's going on with rats is that no one knows exactly how many there are. And according to researchers like Dr. Richardson, the key to controlling rats is actually managing ourselves.
One big missing piece of data from this study is a lot of insight into tropical and subtropical cities. And it's not because we didn't look, it's just because those cities didn't have the available data. The only subtropical city we have is New Orleans, and we weren't able to represent any tropical cities. So I would absolutely like to follow up on this study with data coming from more of those warm weather cities to answer your question exactly about what's going on in those parts of the world and how it may or may not be different than what we saw in more the temperate, higher latitude cities that dominate this particular study. Based on climate warming trends, also the way people are redistributing themselves across the world in terms of becoming a more urban species ourselves as Homo sapiens, and the way that we're developing urban areas to kind of use more green space and take that over as urban development, I do expect these urban environmental trends to promote rat population growth and increases in rats. But again, that's in the absence of cities changing the way that they control these rats. And I want to be careful because for the cities that are experiencing these increases in rats, it's not an indictment of the way they're doing things. Almost always they are underfunded and understaffed. They're not given a big enough budget to really handle this proactively. So cities that are committed to addressing this issue, one of the things they'll have to do is to devote more funding and more personnel to these rodent mitigation teams to try to push back this sort of tide that seems to be happening with increasing rat population growth. So there are things that can be done to kind of be more proactive about abating these increasing rat numbers, but that will require a change in the way cities handle them. The other thing that's a big part of the solution here is kind of moving away from lethal control as being the main thing that rodent control plans are usually centered around. We oftentimes talk about IPM, integrated pest management, where the goal is to use many different techniques and not rely solely on poisons and rodenticides and things to control these animals. But in practice, by and large, these rodent mitigation programs are still focused on killing rats that are already there rather than eliminating or reducing the what we call conducive conditions that support rats being in that area. And so those would mean removing access to food waste, removing like harborage piles, debris piles that these rats can hide in and create their nest and stay safe in. And some cities are making progress on this. Like, I think New York is probably, when people think about New York, rats are one of the things they probably think about as being associated with New York City. And that's fair. That is fair. Because for a long time, the sanitation code for the last 40 or 50 years in New York City has been to leave trash on the sidewalks in bags until the next morning when the trash collection folks come in and remove that. And it's not rocket science to understand that that leaves food available for rats for hours overnight, since this is a nocturnal species. But in the last 2 years or so, the Department of Sanitation and the mayor's office and the new rat czar, Kathy Karate in New York City, have really done a good job of coming together and communicating and devising plans that will mean not allowing residents to put bags of trash out on the sidewalk, removing those very early and containerizing them so that that trash is presumably less accessible to the rodents to use for a food resource.
Rats are associated with more than 50 pathogens that affect humans, and those can be transferred through their urine, feces, saliva, nest materials, and parasites. There's also increasing evidence that rats could have, quote, huge mental health impacts on the people living around them. So the question then is, why do we not take the extreme step of exterminating all rats? What kind of role do they play in the wider ecosystem?
So it's an interesting question because there's an advocate for everybody. And so when you talk about removing the rats, we do sometimes hear from folks that wonder about their current role in the urban ecosystem. And when you're thinking about the zoonotic diseases they transmit or kind of the mental health impacts they have on folks and the damage they do, the first thing you think about isn't like, oh, what's their role in the food chain of cities? But they do have a role in the food web of modern day urban food webs. And so we know a lot of birds of prey will take them. So hawks and owls that do just fine in cities will take rats. In some areas, less so here in North America in the cities that I'm thinking of, but in other parts of the world, there are mesocarnivores like foxes that make it into cities and can hunt and consume rats. And so there's a big challenge with treating rats as just another trophic level in the urban food web, and maybe even thinking about introducing birds of prey or more of them so that they can take more rats from these numbers. And the big challenge with that is that rodents are oftentimes consuming poison baits with rodenticides in them. And oftentimes those active ingredients aren't potent enough to kill a rat with one feeding. And so it may take a few feedings before that rat either becomes so sick it doesn't come above ground or that it actually dies. And that's an issue if an owl takes a rodent that's had 2 or 3 rodenticide feedings, and then it eats another one, and then it eats another one, because we have biomagnification up the food web where that owl or that hawk will start accumulating more and more of these poisonous active ingredients, usually concentrated in their livers. And so oftentimes they will die because of what we call secondary non-target poisoning. They become non-target species, and they suffer the consequences of our lethal control efforts with these rodenticides. So it's really challenging. We would see that in foxes and mesocarnivores too. In the North America, at least, we have a lot of issues with non-target poisoning of higher level carnivores. It's a big issue in California, thinking about rodenticides and like cougars, mountain lions, coyotes, things like that. In California specifically, there are a lot of new regulations that limit the public's access to these rodenticide compounds, and that is likely coming to other parts of the U.S. and North America.
Dr. Richardson's study findings are a wake-up call about the challenge rats may pose in a warmer world, including rat-borne zoonotic disease spillovers, and this is also why proper study and planning of mitigation strategies are vital when it comes to managing rats. That was Climate Connections on Money FM 89.3.